Good morning and welcome to the new edition of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. Long back in the 18th century, Alexander Pope had said, "For forms of government let fools contest. Whatever is best, administer is best." And that remains true today. But there has been a certain romance, certain mystique attached to the democratic form of government. And the nostalgic democratic working in the ancient Greeks and in the panchayati system in India. The mystique, liberty, equality, fraternity that permeated French Revolution, the romance of Patrick Henry saying, "Give me liberty or give me death," and Abe Lincoln saying, "The government of the people, by the people, of the people." They have excited people. They have been a sort of siren attracting people, but they have remained essentially a mirage. Democracies have been set up, and we see that mostly they have either failed or in some cases where they have been successful, they have been trends towards totalitarianism, authoritarianism. We have seen this all over the world. USA still continues to be extremely democratic despite 200 years, but even there the trend towards centralization, towards more authoritarianism are visible, clearly visible. As a matter of fact, the desire of the ruler to be successful and to be perpetual has always been there. People who were elected by the people as the representatives tended to grasp power and become dictators, kings, and so on. And then not only that, they also wanted the power to be generational, transmitted from one generation to the other. And we have seen this all over the world. In America, only 22 families control the whole system. And I had written about that in one of my articles. And I pointed out how these families have manipulated directly and indirectly the power structure. In India, you can count these families on the fingertips. Agree that the present prime minister doesn't belong to that dynasty, but then even today, and the kings, the former kings, still have so much say that they are elected. And at one time, they had formed a political party called Swatantra Party to contest the elections, and they were very successful. Why is it that the democracies become dictators? Well, the earliest reference to it is in the fables. Even before the Aesop fable, there was a story which was later adopted in as fable, and that is in Phaedrus. The story concerns a group of frogs who called on the great god Zeus to send them a king. He threw them a log, which fell in the pond with a loud splash, terrified them. Eventually, one of the frogs peeped over the water, and seeing the log was not moving, was satisfied. Soon all of the frogs hopped on the log and made fun of the king. And then the frog said, "Well, what sort of a king is this? He doesn't say anything, he doesn't react, he doesn't rule. So they again appealed to Gorgias and said, look, we need a real king. So he sent on a water snake, and water snake started eating these frogs. Once more, they appealed to the Jews that this was a tyrant. And the reply was that they must face the consequences of their request. Later on, the variations they changed it to King Law, King Stock, King Iran, and so on. But this essentially shows that the people do not want a soft spoken person who just doesn't impact them. They want somebody to rule them. As a matter of the quest for God is translated into the quest for a strong leader. And when a leader is strong, it's human nature to perpetuate the power. The same story of King Log and King Frog was carried on by theologian Martin Luther, the person who started the Protestant movement. In his book on governmental authority, he speaks of the scarcity of good rulers and alludes to the fable, this very fable, to show how humanity deserves the rule it gets. So the people get the rules they deserve according to that, and that's correct. Even in Hindi, the saying, Yatha Raja Tatha Praja. There was a book, in 1670, Emblem Book by Christopher Muir. And he says that those who do not appreciate freedom are sent a tyrant by divine will. So people have to appreciate liberty. You see, what happens is when you give people an inch, they take the whole of it. They're not satisfied with it. Liberty for them means license. They forget that there's always a limitation in a social relationship. And in case you cannot have that, then the liberties would be circumscribed. And that's why you would see that the trends are towards authoritarianism. I have written today an article that Trudeau government is moving towards authoritarianism, and the latest bills in the parliament, C10, which I had discussed in detail in one of my comments, and C36, they are a violation of the very concept of democracy. And Canada is supposed to be an extremely democratic country. And here the trend we see is towards authoritarianism, notwithstanding the love and admiration of Prime Minister Trudeau for China, for Cuba, Fidel Castro, and others. But then the very fact that there is a visible trend towards ruling the people, the thought is sought to be controlled. Just the day before, yesterday and yesterday, the Indian newspapers are fill up. Pegasus spyware. Now, what is that? That's controlling people, surveillance. And that's happening all over the world. Surveillance is conducted not only for the safety of the country, which it is important intelligence, but then when you control the people, the thoughts, and that is manipulation of thoughts, you will see authoritarianism. Look at what's happening in Europe, majoritarianism in India, despite the fact that the Prime Minister is an excellent patriot and has very good policies, but the trend towards authoritarianism is there. And that's why I'm going to say, imagine the police arrest a person, prosecutes him for sedition, and the fault of the person is he has sent it to eat. Urine, co-urine has no use. So this sort of oppression is a sign of authoritarianism, where it's either my way or the highway. And as I talked of Canada, talked of India, Europe, which was supposed to be the mainstay of democracy of the US, Hungary, Austria, and all other places are turning totalitarian. And the simple reason is totalitarianism or authoritarianism is a reaction to democracy. When democracy gets out of hand, then people are tired. The king log gives them license to behave they want. So the more people want king's talk. And before the expression finds the democracy undergoes a change and becomes anarchy, some men emerges. In Pakistan, they emerges in the form of the army. And out of 70 odd years, for 50 odd years, or 55 odd years, it was the army which you, a strong man, all there. And even now, the main ruling force is army, and the prime minister just has to accept what the army says. So that it's not democracy that way. Burma, Myanmar was a great democracy, but then army took over. And even the leader who had been in jail for a long time, Aung Suu, is again in jail. Canada, we are seeing. USA, we have seen. How NSA today and the Homeland Security are preponderant. The whole thought pattern, the way your movements are controlled. I was amazed. I received, and I now keep on receiving regular emails from Google. They tell me where I have gone, on which date, how much time I spent. For example, last year when I had gone, they said that I have traveled in 3 continents in a period of 4 months, so many kilometers, so many places. And even for example, the officers that had gone, they had mentioned that. Now, this information would naturally be misused by the government to know what my ideas are. This is basically the recreation of what Huxley wrote in his novel Brave New World and Orwell in his book 1984, that dystopias. You know, democracy has always been thought of as a utopia. And when utopias degenerate, the result is dystopia. And that is what's happening. This is the classic way what the Greeks used to say, the forms of government. It was anarchy. Then came the divine right of the kings, the priests kings, basically. Then the kings, the secular kings without priestly class. Then democracy. And then mobocracy. And then again oligarchy or dictatorship. So this is a cyclical thing. The change would be there. The cycle would keep on changing. And then totalitarianism is just another form of monarchy. Or the divine ruler, the king used to be considered as the representative of the god. And even now, for example, North Korea, the leader is deemed to be a representative of the highest authority, though they don't call him the god, of course. So what really happens is that people are never satisfied with what they have. They yearn for something better, but they forget their own responsibility, their own culpability. If a democracy is degenerating into mobocracy, this is the responsibility and fault of the people. That's their culpability. They have given or accelerated the growth of the cycle of converting democracy into authoritarianism. Undeniably, Indian democracy is today much more authoritarian than it ever was. Of course, I agree that Modi hasn't used Article 356 to throw the governments out, the state government, the way Indira Gandhi did, Jawaharlal Nehru did. No, he hasn't. But still, the way things are going, the way the laws are being passed, the way the thought pattern is sought to be altered, the way the denigration of the old leaders like Nehru and Gandhi are there is a pattern emerging. And the concept even in India, in the beginning it was Indira is India, India is Indira, was equally banned, and today is saying that there is no alternative is banned. When you have no alternative, you are building up a personality cult. And personality cult is the first step towards authoritarianism. We have seen that happen everywhere. You give an adulation to a leader, unstinted support to a leader, and the power goes to the head. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And corruption need not only be of money. Corruption can be manifold. The intoxication of power is much more than the intoxication of that. So, the popular leaders, when they find that their term is expiring or they are losing their hold, then they become dictators. That's what happened in Nkrumah, Ghana. A very fine person, I met him 3 times. A complete lover of the people, but when he found that in the next election he is likely to lose because of the surveillance and the intelligence reports, what he did, he declared it himself to be the president for life. Robert Mugabe, a freedom fighter, became the most corrupt leader. Indira Gandhi ordered elections, not because she was extremely democratic, but because the intelligence reports had assured her that in case of elections she'll win. Here the intelligence reports were wrong. So the once you install a leader and believe that this leader can do no wrong, you are on a road towards totalitarianism. And thus, this totalitarianism is created by the people. Sometimes external resources, forces, sometimes the economic forces. There's a disaster, economic disaster, recession, and a strong leader, capable leader comes up. The way Roosevelt came up with a New Deal. And he was elected president 4 times. And that's why the amendment was there that the maximum term would be 2 terms for the president. And being elected 4 times, 16 years, that's as good as being a president for life. And had he not died, he would still have continued. Look at President Z, elected and then becomes the president for life. In Putin, legally he could not be president for a long time, so he becomes the prime minister. And as the prime minister becomes more predominant and again reverts back as president. So the whole world over. So the reasons are psychological. Nobody wants to leave power. Then social and economic. Then political. All these reasons tend to demolish the citadel of democracy and turn it into a fortress of dictatorship. Many times it's required, but the personal lives of the people and the herd mentality of the people They're easily led astray by propaganda. Their thought patterns are changed. They are the causes of people accepting this cyclical change. And as I said many times, change is a part of nature. So democracies becoming dictatorships are a part of the process. You cannot stop it. You might be able to delay it, but you cannot stop it. Ultimately, the social process, the natural process, and the political process is synchronized. And that's why dictatorships always would replace democracies. And then after some time, people will rise up again and demand democracy. What's happening in Cuba now? So simultaneously, you will see these changes going on in the various parts of the different countries. On the one side, there'll be a demand for democracy. On the other side, people want a strong leader and entrust their destiny to that leader. So this cycle would continue, and there's nothing to be afraid of, except that it may not happen in our lifetimes, but it's definitely going to happen. It's a generational change. And even if the oldest democracy in the world, like USA, is not able to resist that, today, if you study the political inclination, the Democratic Party is absolutely inclined towards socialism and communism. US, Canada is definitely in favor of Chinese system, and given his saying, the Prime Minister would act like that. And yet he is acting like that. And there is no doubt that this process would continue the world over. So be prepared for the change in your system of governance. The facade would change. Inside it will be the strong leader who would always command respect, veneration, and power. Think about it. And just the sloganeering of democratic setup should not delude you to the danger lurking therein that this is a temporary feature. Thank you.